Yuji is alive, and he has become the strongest sorcerer on Earth. Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo Chapter 10, Majority Vote, was crazy. A collection of Jujutsu officials were watching a projection of Maru's fight against the curse user. One man asked if they could really allow this sort of thing. Usami wanted him to elaborate. The older man feared that they were giving the aliens too much leeway. He mentioned the fact that the Simurians refused Usami's escort suggestion. Usami explained that in this case, both sorcerers, Yuka and Tsurugi, were unable to continue fighting. So Maru, the Simurian special envoy, joined the conflict to resolve it. However, another man mentioned that when Tsurugi tried to get involved, that same special envoy tried to hurt him. Much to Mino's shock, because previously, Usami made him delete the part of the video that featured the two. So it wasn't like he showed them the full thing. Which is to say, the war-favoring sorcerers are likely to be watching by other means. The younger sorcerer insisted that according to Article 7 of Jujutsu Regulations, the Simurians are to be considered a threat. But without flinching, Usami retorted that they aren't, according to the Hikari provision. The young man was in disbelief, while another questioned what Usami was referring to. A bright-haired young woman explained that many years ago, there were discussions about turning Jujutsu battles into performances as a form of public gambling. Apparently, the government made the existence of cursed spirits public information due to the events of the culling game, so the secrecy clause of Article 8 was removed, along with that plan for performances, something that a pair of sorcerers still couldn't believe was ever on the table to begin with. The Hikari provision was established among the first revisions to Jujutsu Regulations. In it was a clause that allows sorcerers to involve themselves in paid combat. The pair didn't know, because these days, you wouldn't interact with the provision unless you're being hired as a personal bodyguard or something. Usami explained that Maru and the Okotsu siblings have all signed contracts with him, and under the Hikari provision, there's no problem with contracted sorcerers fighting one another. Maru signed it without even reading. The younger man shouted that only sorcerers approved by headquarters are allowed to be hired for combat. And again, Usami stated that Maru was hired as a general bodyguard. The young woman laughed at the insinuation that this was all just an accident caused by a latent sorcerer, which is someone who uses Jujutsu unknowingly and is therefore rarely punished for doing so. The young man still didn't buy it. He claimed that they should know by now that the Simurians use cursed energy. Usami pointed out that they still don't know if that's the case for all Simurians, which made the guy question why he was going to so much trouble just to defend them. To that, Usami asked why the guy was going out of his way to be against them. The youngster responded that in diplomacy, it's all over when the other side stops taking you seriously. That the Simurians already pushed their buttons once, so it's time for them to show the aliens that Earth has its own last resort. As such, they need to find Itadori Yuji. And here we can see him in the present day, sifting through a crowd. And from what we can see, he still looks pretty youthful. Usami questioned the young man's statement. He conceded that that sort of thinking could apply to an individual or a private company, but not to international relations. That if the guy wants to cause a stir to feel a sense of accomplishment, then that's his business. But he shouldn't drag the rest of them, let alone the country, into it. Now embarrassed, that comment finally managed to shut him up. Although technically, Cross didn't sign a contract, and he was the one responsible for the incident. So they do actually have grounds for the designation. Afterwards, Usami told Mino to apologize to the man on his behalf later on. Mino assured his boss that he doesn't think he's in the wrong on this. However, he also doesn't think that searching for Itadori Yuji would be such a bad idea, along with the fact that nothing good ever comes from making enemies of your own people. Which takes us to the Simurian mothership. Osuki was complaining to a Vermelian elder about an outsider like Deborah having final say. With that, he questioned the point of discussions and voting at all. The elder claimed that this is how a controlled council system works. It sounded more like a dictatorship to Osuki, but it's what Maru and Cross decided. And I mean, they made the spaceship, so it makes sense to listen to them. Now that Dura is gone, they believe Deborah is the one most qualified to be their chieftain. And since he's an outsider, he can make the most objective decisions. But right now, Osuki isn't in favor of the twins. especially Cross on account of his attitude. Osuki blamed Dabura for the loss of Dura and the abandoning of their home. But the old man reminded him that he can't beat Dabura, let alone the twins, something that Osuki couldn't argue against. The old man urged him to keep his composure, along with a reminder that Dabura can only veto a council decision 2 more times. Maru's injury was already common knowledge amongst the council, so they were likely to receive the same majority vote as before. Then, they would finally reach the verdict they've been looking for. Osuki was eager to crush Japan. After all, having a country without a military as their initial contact was a rare opportunity. That said, their knowledge of Earth's military technology was superficial at best. So it was fortunate that they were dealing with a sorcerer state. And Cross knew about World War II, so they must know about nukes. Osuki was convinced that aiming for coexistence with Earth would make them look weak and result in them being stolen from all over again. So they need to make a strong stance, even if it means confrontation. The Elder was determined to establish an autonomous zone in their capital, which is to say, overturn their laws and establish new ones. Osuki resolved to have the Rumelians be like the Escunte this time around. He refused to be stolen from ever again. And Osuki looks bigger and more imposing now. And for the first time, his usual gang isn't behind him. Elsewhere, Cross called out to Jabaloma. He asked the man why he was withholding the direction of his vote. Jabaloma claimed to be doing so because Cross was. Cross's eyes widened. He remembered Yuka saying the same thing about him, along with the fact that she believes he pretended to be Maru so he could learn more about them. Jabaloma explained that the 2 of them hold 10 votes each. So, if they both vote for coexistence, it would overturn what has thus far been the majority decision. Although, Dabura could always just veto it again. So Dabura is the reason why they haven't gone with either direction just yet. Jabaloma promised to follow whatever Cross decides to do. Cross questioned if Jabaloma doesn't have his own desires when it comes to this. But Jabaloma believes that entrusting the decisions of others is just as valid. Eventually, the council was assembled. Cross just needed to cast his vote, coexistence or opposition. He remembered the gratitude of a little boy, an honest apology from his brother's friend, and the genuine request of a dying girl. He remembered Dura's claim that cities and villages were all built on the ideals of someone. Cross remembered his home, along with the rubble it was reduced to. The insignificant piece of stone that his father clutched onto as he died. Cross was overwhelmed by a swirl of conflicting emotions. Osuki and the old man were confident that things would swing their way, but what came next left them speechless. Jabaloma announced the results of the majority vote. They have voted in favor of coexistence, and they would strive for it by better understanding Japan as a planet's representative country. They plan to set up discussions and cultural exchanges to do so. Osuki was outraged, especially since Cross and Jabaloma were previously against coexistence. But according to Cross, they were just withholding their judgment until now. Desperate, Osuki suggested that they invalidate the vote since Maru is absent. However, Maru clearly expressed his desire for coexistence prior to the meeting. Osuki was pissed. He turned to Dabura and questioned what he would do as their chieftain. Seemingly indifferent, Dabura had no issues with the decision. Osuki bitterly cursed the Escunte deserter for denying their wishes. Frankly, Dabura believes that conflict or invasion can begin at any time. Once they go with that direction, the possibility of properly understanding one another will never arise again. So, thoroughly uninterested, Dabura supports the concept of getting to know each other first. After all, they left Simuria in pursuit of neighbors. After the meeting, Jabaloma expressed his deep respect for Cross. And although the respect was mutual, Cross didn't want to be praised for his decision, as at the end of the day, he's just tired. From there, we return to a building on Earth. Usami, Yuka, and Tsurugi were all assembled. They were meeting with Cross and Jabaloma. At first, Usami didn't believe their story of being driven away after losing a duel. But that was because he couldn't fathom Dabura losing. The fact that they lost to Dabura was far more believable. Hearing about the whole Kalyan thing, Yuka questioned if the Rumelians suffer every time one of them dies of natural causes. But according to Jabaloma, whose expressions are now a lot less intimidating, Kalyans are immortal. They can only die by being killed. The twins were amazed. Tsurugi could totally see why they'd revere them as sacred beasts. In terms of their cultural exchange, Usami suggested a dinner party. Jabaloma agreed, and decided to send Maru and Cross to help with preparations. In turn, Usami wanted the Okotsu siblings to do the same for their side. Unnerved, Tsurugi claimed that they can't cook anything fancy. But as a chronic competitor, Yuka didn't like being included in his ineptitude. Usami promised to provide them with all the guidance they need. Before long, the four were in the kitchen. More specifically, Yuka's and Maru's Deli kitchen. Their brothers were unmoved. Apparently they were referencing an old cooking show that was making a comeback, although Maru just did what she told him to do, which made him sound like her lapdog. Yuka wanted to be sure that there weren't any problems with their list of food. Then after that, they can just make and taste. And by problems, she meant allergies or religious restrictions. That made Tsurugi fear that some types of meat may be similar to Kalyans. Yuka wasn't even sure if they eat meat in the first place. Maru assured the two that they don't need to go to so much trouble. Cross explained that the form of every Kalyan is unique, that Rumelians eat livestock raised for meat as well as fish. That let Tsurugi know that their planet had oceans, which was a given to his sister since oceans are the source of all life. That said, they don't have anything like sharks, as evidenced by the events of Chapter 3. Suddenly, Yuka realized that they don't have any flour-based dishes on the list. Tsurugi figured that it's because they're not just making Japanese food. They were representing the whole planet after all. But even so, the omission wasn't something they could allow. Maru wasn't sure what they meant, at least until Yuka reminded him of the takoyaki they had, the memory of which made Maru begin to drool. He loudly told his brother Cross that takoyaki is delicious. Tsurugi double-checked with Cross to see if Maru is especially picky or has weird tastes. Since he doesn't, the other Simurians are likely to enjoy takoyaki too. With that, Yuka decided that their cultural exchange would be a takopa, which is a takoyaki party. She even started calling Maru Takosuke. With that, they were off to buy fillings. She even mentioned putting mochi inside, which sounds a bit unhinged. Meanwhile, Tsurugi decided to show Cross what it's like. And just like that, Cross wasn't so sure about their plan. Yet again, the world building of this series is really something else. Gege continues to set up interesting things for us all to look forward to. Modulo really has the potential to be one of the best sequels in the history of popular shonen. And thanks to this, I'll be having takoyaki tonight. As always, I'm Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.